We are entering a phase where crypto is no longer sitting on the sidelines of the financial system. It is being integrated into it, and not randomly, not chaotically, but strategically. What we are seeing right now looks very intentional. Certain companies are not just participating in the conversation. They are being positioned at the center of the redesign of the U.S. financial architecture. And in my view, yes, President Trump has aligned with specific digital asset companies to help shape that future. Ripple appears to be one of the primary ones. Today we're going to unpack this carefully. By the end of this, you'll have the full picture, and you can decide for yourself whether this is coincidence or coordinated alignment. But from where I stand, watching everything fall into place since early 2025, the pattern surrounding Ripple is too consistent to ignore. Before we go deeper, if you're watching reverse crypto and you value high-signal analysis without the noise, make sure you subscribe and hit the like button. It directly supports the channel and keeps you ahead of what most people are missing. Now, let's zoom out. Recently, the Blockchain Association announced participation in the US-UK Transatlantic Task Force for Markets of the Future. The meeting took place at the US Treasury. Not a side event, not a conference panel, the Treasury. And among the selected participants? Ripple. Alongside firms like Jump and Nota Bene, Ripple was present while policymakers and industry leaders discussed cross-border digital asset innovation and modernization of financial markets. That phrasing matters. Modernization of financial markets. This isn't about retail speculation. This isn't about meme coins. This is about structural upgrades to capital markets between two of the largest financial jurisdictions on Earth. The US and the UK together represent a massive portion of global capital flow. When those two coordinate on financial infrastructure, the rest of the world pays attention. And Ripple is repeatedly inside those conversations. This task force is focused on interoperability, on aligning regulatory frameworks, on ensuring that digital assets, tokenized securities, and stablecoins can operate across borders without fragmentation. That word, fragmentation, keeps appearing. Because without coordination, every country builds isolated systems, and isolated systems don't scale globally. Now here's where it gets more interesting. This wasn't the first time Ripple was seated at that level. Rewind to September during President Trump's state visit to the UK. Ripple leadership attended a Downing Street roundtable alongside the UK Chancellor, the US Treasury Secretary, and major financial and crypto representatives from both nations. The topic? Cooperation on digital assets between the US and the UK. Shortly after that meeting, the formal announcement of the Transatlantic Task Force was made. That roundtable was essentially the precursor. That is not random timing. And this builds on another key event. At the start of January, Ripple secured its EMI license from the FCA in the United Kingdom. This is not an easy approval. The overwhelming majority of applicants fail. Nearly 9 out of 10 firms get rejected. Ripple was approved. Simultaneously, Ripple also strengthened its regulatory positioning in the European Union. But the UK approval is especially important, because if the US and UK are building a coordinated digital financial corridor, Ripple now has regulatory footing on both sides of that bridge. That's strategic positioning. Now let's examine what this task force is actually designed to accomplish. The publicly stated objective is to enhance collaboration between US and UK financial systems in order to drive innovation and growth in global markets. That sounds generic at first, but when you read deeper, it becomes clear this is about two things. First, short to medium-term coordination on digital assets while legislation is still evolving. Second, long-term integration of capital markets, reducing friction for companies raising funds across borders. In simple terms, digitize the bridge between the two systems. Blockchain technology by nature does not recognize geographic borders. It is global infrastructure. But regulation does recognize borders. And when regulation is misaligned, innovation stalls. The solution? Cooperative frameworks. According to international banking surveys, over 90% of central banks are actively researching or developing digital currencies or stablecoin frameworks. That means we are approaching a moment where multiple sovereign digital systems could emerge. Without interoperability, those systems become silos. The Transatlantic Task Force appears designed to prevent that outcome. Ripple's own public communications highlight specific areas it believes are essential to consider. Stablecoins for cross-border settlement, recognition of tokenized collateral, harmonized intermediary standards, and proportionate regulatory roles for industry participants. These are not marketing buzzwords. These are infrastructure-level design decisions. Ripple opened its London office in 2016. It now employs over 120 professionals in the UK, making it the company's largest hub outside the United States. That means Ripple is not just lobbying in the UK, it is embedded in its ecosystem. And when we examine recent statements from members of the President's Council of Advisors on digital assets, the language mirrors messaging we've heard from Ripple leadership for months, emphasizing pragmatic legislation, the importance of compromise, and the urgency of delivering regulatory clarity rather than waiting for perfection. That alignment is notable. It suggests coordination rather than confrontation. Think about the sequence of events. Ripple convenes a UK policy summit emphasizing urgency for regulatory clarity. Months later, the FCA accelerates stablecoin frameworks. Then the US-UK Task Force is announced. Then Ripple appears at Treasury-level discussions. Then legislative momentum in the US intensifies. You can call this coincidence. But when every major policy acceleration seems to follow Ripple's engagement, it begins to look like influence. Now zoom out even further. This is not just about crypto adoption. This is about the architecture of the next financial system. Tokenization of real-world assets, cross-border liquidity rails, digital collateral recognition, wholesale settlement modernization. These are foundational shifts. And in high-level Treasury meetings, Ripple has been one of the few companies present, and notably, the only participant in certain sessions operating a public blockchain designed specifically for cross-border settlement. That distinction matters enormously, because when governments explore infrastructure upgrades, they don't experiment randomly. They engage with companies that already have operational rails. Ripple's network has been live for over a decade. It has partnerships globally. It has regulatory experience across multiple jurisdictions, and it has been battle-tested through litigation, scrutiny, and compliance review. Now here's the controversial part. Was Ripple officially hand-picked? There is no signed document publicly stating that, but strategic positioning doesn't require public declarations. If you observe repeated invitations to high-level policy meetings, regulatory approvals across key jurisdictions, alignment in public messaging, and integration into bilateral modernization initiatives, you start to see a pattern. It feels less like accidental inclusion and more like structural integration. And when you consider that these discussions are about rebuilding cross-border financial infrastructure for the 21st century, the implications become much larger than most retail investors realize. Ripple is not simply participating in crypto markets. It appears to be participating in system design. And when system design happens, the companies inside the room shape the blueprint. That's why this matters. Not because of hype, but because infrastructure decisions made today determine liquidity flows tomorrow. We are watching that process unfold in real time. And most people are still focused on price charts. This is bigger than charts. It's about who sits at the table when the rules are written. And Ripple is sitting there.